So hello and welcome to part 4 of the AS and A-Level Java series, and in today's episode we are going to be looking at variables. So up until now we've only been able to output something onto the screen, and the way we did that is we made use of something that was called a literal. So in Java, a literal, or rather basically in any programming language really, a literal is a value that is static, or that is supplied as is. So you remember that in the previous sessions we made use of the literal hello world in order to output it onto the screen. And so what we are going to do in this particular lesson is that I want to introduce you to something called variables. So variables are a named memory location within your program, is it? So you realize that we have maybe before we go further exploring the concept of variables, we need to first come back to the concept of data types. So you remember that data types, we have 5 primitive data types in, maybe let me just make use of a multi-line comment here. So /* just like that. So data types, you remember that we have 5 primitive data types in programming, and the first one is we have real numbers, right? Then the second type of data type that we have is integers or whole numbers, as it were. Then the third type of variable that we have are strings. Then we also have a data type called characters, which are basically single character, or one character strings, if I should say. And finally we have a data type called a boolean. Let me just make sure that I capitalize that I there. Yeah. All right, so these are the primitive data types that we have, and you realize that for the most part when you are dealing with your program, you are going to need to store data in some form, and the way you are going to store data for your particular program is to declare something called a variable, or sometimes you might actually declare a constant, is it? So we are going to look at how you can declare variables and constants in Java, and we are also just going to briefly look at literals in passing. So maybe the best place to start is to look at, let me just get rid of the comments, I don't think we need them already. We are going to look at a string literal, right, that we used in the previous session. So in the previous session, you remember that we used the words hello world. I can just type world correctly there. I don't know what's happening. My typing is off. Alright, so hello world. So this right here that we have inside of that we are passing as an argument to the print line method. This variable that I've highlighted in blue there, it's called a literal, is it? So we are passing the literal hello world to this print line method. But you realize that when you are writing code, you always want to make sure that you write a piece of code that is reusable in different use cases. So that's where variables come in play. So if you wanted to have to pass a different, say maybe a message which is not hello world, the best place to go about it is to use something called a variable, is it? So a variable, remember I said it's a named memory location, and the way you declare variables in Java is that you are going to have so you can just ignore the comment for now. So variable declaration goes like so for in Java. You are going to have the data type, then you are going to have the identifier, then you are going to have the assignment operator, then you are going to have a value. This is how you declare a variable in Java. And maybe I should mention that you can have there's an optional specifier that you can put in this case. This one is particularly true for for constants, but for variables we do not need this optional specifier right here, right? You just need to have the data type, the identifier, and the value. Then of course it should end with a semicolon, just like any other statement in Java. It should end with a semicolon. So let's actually go ahead and declare a variable called of type string, and we are going to call it maybe say message. So say string. So remember a message, it's actually going to be a string, right? So what we want to do in this case, let's just use the same words really. Hello world. It's what we want to display onto the screen, or rather in the console, down in the console there. But instead of passing hello world, that is, instead of passing a literal in this case, we can now make use of a variable. So the variable is called message. That's the identifier for our particular variable. So as you can imagine, if I run this code, it's simply going to output the words hello world down there in the console, right here, right? So this is the power of variables. They allow you to change, or rather to assign a value that you can come and change in one place in your code. Is it? So suppose I wanted to change this code so that it displays something else, that is not the words hello world. I would just come in this place and change that literal to display something else, and if I were to run this code I should get exactly that down in the console. Is it? So that's the power of variables. So as the name suggests, variables, the value can change as the program runs. Is it? So sometimes a good example of variables is maybe if you are playing a first-person shooter game and you want to count the number of hit points a player has, right? Or maybe you want to count the number of items a player collects as they progress through a maze. You are going to store that particular value called score or maybe health inside of a variable, right? So speaking of that, maybe let's actually declare a variable of a different type, maybe say an integer. So for integers, we use the keyword int in Java. So we can call this one score, and maybe we can assign a default value or a default score of 0. Is it? So that when our player starts playing, they haven't scored anything. So we do not, we just set it to 0 initially, then we'll increment it as we progress, or as they progress through the level. And then maybe we just need to print out that score right there. Then maybe you also want to declare a float, which is basically a floating point number. You might know them as real numbers or decimal point numbers. So maybe we can have a float called price, and maybe the price of bread nowadays is $0.20. You put that right there. So what you need to be wary of in Java is that the float data type, when you declare a variable of type float and you assign a value to it, notice that I'm getting that red squiggly line there. That's an error. Is it? So Java expects you to append or to put an F right at the end there, so that it's treated as a float. So that is the downside of having to use the data type float. Oftentimes programmers tend to forget to append that F, and their code is not going to compile, and you might start pulling your hair out wondering what mistake you made in your code. So it's always a good idea to avoid to use float, but use something called a double. So basically a double is a value that can be used to store decimal points, but it's called double because it has double precision when as compared to float. In other words, it uses twice the memory space as required by a float. But of course, when you're writing console applications, you don't really need to worry about that because it's not really an issue. Nowadays, computer systems have abundance. Of course, it's not unlimited, but the memory that is available on modern day computer systems, it's more than enough to have several doubles going on in your program, and you need not to worry about that. All right. So now what we have basically we have 3 types going on here. Then maybe let's have another type called character, and the way you declare character in Java is to use the char keyword, and with characters now we make use of the single quotation marks, right? So that's what distinguishes characters from strings in Java. So for strings we use double quotation marks, and for characters we use single quotation marks. And maybe let's just go ahead and print that particular string, that particular character called symbol down in the console as well. And then also maybe we can declare a boolean. I think that's the last data type that we need to declare. So the way you declare a boolean is to make use of the boolean keyword and followed by your identifier name. Then you can put a value. So maybe let's set it to true, right? Maybe this particular boolean value checks if a user is going to check if a user is registered with us. So we can set it to true, Yeah, then we are just going to print that down in the console there. So we are done with our declarations. So notice that this is a declaration for variables. Okay, now I should put a space in between the output, and let me just make use of comments here. So outputting variables here, yeah, just like that. So notice these are variables, is it? So maybe I might as well just put variable declaration. That's what I want to type here, declaration. Right, so then maybe now that we are familiar with some variables, let's go ahead and look at how you can declare constants. Actually, before we declare constants, maybe let's just run the code and see what output we get down there in the console. So you see that here we have a string, here we have an integer of 0, here we have a floating point or a decimal point number 1.2. Notice that when I run it in the console, that f that we had earlier on appended, when we assign the value of 120, it's no longer there, is it? So that's just one thing that you need to always be in mind whenever you're working with floats. Never forget to put that f there. And then of course here we have a double, 2.5. Then we have the symbol, which is a character, data type character. Data type is character. Then we have true, which is of Boolean data type. Then now let's move on to look at how you can declare constants. So in order for you to declare a constant basically it's a value that should not change during the execution of your program, is it? So a constant, it's more or less the same with a variable, but the only difference is that it is a memory location just like a variable, but the only difference is that that value is going to be permanent. You can never change a constant once you declare it. But with a variable, what I can do is I can actually overwrite an old value, like maybe say, let me come to this symbol, right? And I put it over here. Actually, let me make this declaration after we've output it down there. So where are we outputting the symbol? Right here, right? And then I'm going to maybe say just call it changed, really. Then after I say changed, I'm going to copy this code and paste it here. Then I'm simply going to print out that variable, is it? Then I should run the program one more time so that you can see that. Notice that this time around, actually I didn't change the value. I just changed the identifier. I didn't change the value. Let's put maybe a star there, is it, or an asterisk. Then we are going to run the code, and you realize that this time around we did first print the $sign. Then this time around we printed the star or the asterisk, as it were. So that's a variable. It means you can change once you assign that value. You can always change it later on in the code, and it's simply going to overwrite the old value that was stored in there. But now we want to move on to look at constants and see that this particular thing is not really possible when you are working with constants. So in order for you to declare a constant, you need to make use of the final keyword. So final simply means that this is it. It's not going to change come what may, right? It's never going to change. So that's the only thing that you need to do, or that's the only thing that differentiates a constant and a variable. Final simply means it's final. It's not going to change. Then what follows now is the data type. And the identifier now for constants, we use a different kind of convention. Maybe let's use a constant of type double. Then let's call it pi, right? That is actually pi is defined in Java. Maybe let's use something else. Let's just use int. So for constants you use capital letters that are separated by, or rather capital letter words that are separated by underscores. So for instance, if I wanted to mention the number of, or the maximum number of passengers that can board a bus, right? I could declare it like so. So I say final, then int, then max number passengers. So notice that I'm using capital letter words that are separated by underscores, right? Then let's actually make use of our constant, and I'm just gonna come here and sys out don't print line. Then you realize that I'm printing out max number of passengers right here. So when I go ahead and save and run this code, you realize that you get 75 in this case, right? We are printing out our constant. Then what I'm going to try to do, in order to show you guys that you cannot change a constant once you set it, once you declare it, I'm just gonna try and change this value from 75, maybe say to, what can I do? Alright, actually let me try and do this. I know I haven't done operators with you guys, but just bear with me. So I'm going to say print line, then max number of passengers. So I simply want to add 1 to the max number of passengers, is it? So I'm actually going to try and run this code, and I want you to see what's going to happen. Okay, something, okay, this is not what I was expecting. Alright, I wanted to make it so that it doesn't increment the value. Alright, but I think that's fine for now. Okay, I have to, maybe we'll explore this concept later on as we progress with the tutorial. But basically that's the whole idea behind variables and constants, right? So just to wrap up, variables, this is the declaration. You start with the data type, the identifier, then you pass in the value, and you terminate the statement using a semicolon. Then for constants, you make use of the final keyword. And the convention now for naming constants is to make sure that you use capital letter words that are separated by what? By underscores. That's the convention, really. It's not required that you name it this way, but it's the way that the users of Java or the programmers of Java, and I believe you are one, we've agreed that we should use this convention. So it's always a good idea to stick to convention. And then of course we did look at literals. We were using the hello world literal in the previous tutorials. Yeah, so I think that's just about it for variables and constants in Java. I'll see you in the next one.